problem for Andy Reid.
And look, with all that Andy Reid went through in this game and some of those issues he had, it was still late in this game. It was 28-24 Chiefs. And all of a sudden, a ball gets tipped up. The Chiefs get the interception. It looks like they've won the game. There's a flag on the play. The kind of thought at first was it's a Patriots penalty. All of a sudden, it's a line up in the neutral zone penalty, and it's Dee Ford, one of their key defensive linemen for this Chiefs team, just makes an absolute bonehead play at that point, Eric. I think that's a mistake. We know nothing about football, but I know that if half my body is across the ball, that's probably a penalty. So was this the bonehead play of the century?
In that moment, how could it not be? You cost your team so much by making a mistake like that. And, for a Chiefs, you brought up the Colts game. For a Chiefs front defensive line that played so incredibly well to get the Colts just outside of their comfort zone and totally whacked Andrew Luck off.
I must have missed that part of the game. Is that 10 yards or 15? Personal foul, whacking off number 55 defense. That penalty is accepted from the spot of the foul. And we need to clean up on the 45.
Oh, what was I going to say there? Knocked Andrew Luck off of his game so significantly to get to this point, then to come into this game and not be able to sack a 40-plus-year-old Tom Brady a single time, and then have these kinds of mistakes coming from your defense. What a turnaround in a week from getting here because of that front to absolutely being overshadowed because of that front, including this, which was, yes, a boneheaded play.
Yeah, when it was called and you saw the way he was lined up, and look, I think it was Sal Paolantonio was on ESPN talking about like Andy Reid was upset they made that call in that moment. But Eric, he wasn't even close. The little blue line of scrimmage was like across his number. He wasn't even close to behind the ball. He looked like he was lined up with Gronk. He was in the Patriots' backfield. It wasn't even close. And all he had to do was just look across and realign himself. And we talked about it a little bit, and I texted you something early in this game. Kansas City gets one of the kickoffs to open up this game. They're 4 or 5 yards deep in the end zone. They run it out and immediately get tackled at the 15-yard line. The Patriots, they don't do that, or they have something set up with Patterson where he gets a better return. In that game, the Chiefs just made bonehead plays, and they weren't big things. It was just little things, and you watch the Patriots, and they just didn't do those things. They just didn't do all those killer mistakes and the penalties. Even Tyreek Hill, when he had a 12-yard loss on a punt return, that's pinning your team back and putting you at a deficit against a defense that was playing really good in that moment. Why do you want to pin your young quarterback back? It just felt like the Chiefs made mistakes that the Patriots, frankly, didn't make at that point. And look, there were some calls in that game that certainly didn't help the Patriots. You see Mahomes sort of get smacked upside the head, not called. And late in that game when they needed it on a third down play, you see Brady get hit in the shoulder pad and the flag comes out for a hit to the head of the quarterback, 15 yards, automatic first down. So what was your take there? Was that just a mistake? And again, that is the referee, Clete Blakeman, in that game who's making that call. Was it just simply a miss at that point, or the referees just more inclined to give Brady those calls?
Whoa, boy, that's a loaded question. I think it can go both ways there. I think, a quarterback like Mahomes, who's so mobile, so active back there in the pocket, I think he's going to get less of those calls traditionally than a guy who goes around and is kind of a statue like Tom Brady, and it's just more noticeable. But I also think that 18, 19 years in the league, we talk about it with guys in the NBA who start to seemingly get calls the more they get into their career, more and more referee whistles go in their favor. Brady's going to just get more of those calls at this point in his career. And I, don't want to, again, get into conspiracy with referees or anything like that. There was another time when Mahomes had a face mask pulled that didn't get called when he was on one of his rushes. And I just think that's one of the risks you take as a mobile quarterback. You're going to get less of those judgment calls. And I wasn't surprised. I really wasn't. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. It just seems like little things like that are momentum shifts. They can change a game. And, those penalties, when they go in your favor and you keep the ball, you keep possession, that can really affect the outcome of a game.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to what I talked about when we were talking about the Saints and Rams. When you're talking about opportunities to review things, that's a 15-yard penalty that it feels like if the Chiefs wanted to review or it's a league review on those type of penalties, that's something the league could have looked at. And again, that could have changed the course of that game. Another tough call for the league and the officials in that game was the Edelman call on the punt that got reviewed. It looked like the Chiefs had gotten that ball back, that it had touched Edelman. He really didn't do anything, which made it feel like he definitely wasn't trying to touch that football. One of the tougher reviews that you'll see trying to look at the different angles, one looked like it absolutely didn't touch his thumb. Another one looked like it sort of did. Now, the call in the field was that it touched Edelman and that it was Chiefs' ball. So it's supposed to be indisputable evidence to overturn a call. Did you feel like watching the reviews that you had that indisputable evidence in the replays?
Again, I know I'm not a Patriots homer, but I didn't think that they had the indisputable evidence to overturn that call. To me, and I don't have all the angles probably that the NFL has when they go under that hood and they're looking at everything, and you knew when it was taking some time that it was possibly going to be overturned. But from my eyes, from all the angles they showed on TV, I need to see daylight between the ball and his fingers and part of his shoulder there. And just anywhere that ball could have even grazed him, it's considered a touch. I don't think you have overturning evidence there. All the evidence that would say, yes, it definitely did or did not touch him. So like you said, sometimes it kind of screws one team or another based on what the call was on the field. But in this case, the call on the field was that it touched him. It's Chiefs' ball. I need to see daylight there to overturn that.
Yeah, I thought it was so close. I didn't feel like it was indisputable. I felt like the one angle, it didn't look like it. The other angle, it did. And I just didn't feel like there was multiple angles that made me feel like, no, there was no way he touched it. I'm not convinced that he touched it, but I'm not convinced that he didn't either. And I feel like it should be indisputable, that I should be able to look at that replay and feel like, yep, there's no doubt in my mind he didn't touch it. I didn't really feel like they had that, but I felt like they didn't want the game to be decided on a call that close. And they opted to go with the safer route, which was that he didn't touch it because there wasn't a replay where the ball had a tough angle change or something like that. So, again, a very difficult decision for the league. That's one I don't necessarily know that they can fix because you had a lot of different eyeballs on that. And sort of everybody was in the same type of position where it was like, I don't really know. I don't think he touched it, but I'm not willing to bet my life or my pay on it.
Right. So you got to keep it what it was.
So you should have kept it what it was at that point because, again, I just didn't feel like it was indisputable. So that's the league. They put themselves in a box with that kind of language, and then they didn't feel like they followed through with it. So it'll be the Patriots moving on to Super Bowl 53. We talked about the Saints and what they needed to do. So what do the Chiefs need to do this offseason to improve this roster and get back to this point next year and then be able to beat a team like the Patriots to get to Super Bowl 54?
The good news for the Chiefs is that I don't think they're that far away. I think they are very close to, unfortunately for you as a Broncos fan, controlling the AFC for a number of years if they can do just a few things. Number one, they're going to want to lock up a couple of offensive stars. They're also going to want to solidify the backfield. But Mahomes, Kelsey, what do you want to do with Tyreek Hill? How do you want to manage those contracts coming up? How do you want to give him support as an additional wide receiver 2 or 3 might be helpful? Maybe Watkins is locked up. Anything they want to do to solidify that offense is going to be key. What they really need to do is what they started this week, which was to get rid of the defensive coordinator and start making some shifts on defense. To me, that was their story all year. That was their biggest weakness. You knew Patrick Mahomes, 50 touchdowns. You knew he was going to score just about every time he had the football. But you also knew that the Chiefs couldn't stop a whole lot of people. It ended up being their downfall. They couldn't stop Tom Brady. They've got to get that defense fixed. And if they do, they're going to be a tough team to get through for a long time.
Yeah, I think on the defensive side of the football, that's where I see the glaring need for them at this point, especially sort of their back seven, their linebackers and their secondary. I feel like really need to be upgraded. We talk about it all the time on this show because I don't think it gets talked about enough in basically the national media or even some of your regional type coverage is the fact that the Chiefs are in a really nice window right now. This is probably the best accumulation of talent that Patrick Mahomes will probably have at any point in his career. So he's got this year, he'll probably have next year, maybe 2 more years left, depending on how they'll do his contract, because the rumor that came out before the game was in 2020, he may sign the first $200 million contract. So he's going to probably be at an annual salary more than what Aaron Rodgers is at. And you start to look at the pieces that they're going to have to give up to keep Mahomes. So they got to get the job done now because Tyreek Hill is going to want big time money. They gave Sammy Watkins a ton of money, and Tyreek Hill is far and away a better wide receiver than Sammy Watkins and more important to this team. So what is he going to ask for at this point? They're going to have to make decisions on guys like Chris Jones and on guys like Dee Ford. Are they going to stick with Damian Williams at the running back position? Do they need to go out and do something else at wide receiver? So they've got some holes to fill. They better do it in the next 2 years while they still have the cap space to do it, because once Mahomes' contract hits, they're not going to have that kind of flexibility. So, Eric, when you look at the Saints, you look at the Chiefs, who has the best chance to get to the Super Bowl next year?
Oh, I've got to say the Chiefs, Justin.
Woo. Even over Tommy?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I know they're going to keep going to that well for as long as they can. I think if there's a pretty good chance that if the Patriots win this Super Bowl, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick would have a lot of motivation to hang it up. And even if they lose, if it's a tough loss, they might have motivation to hang it up. I just think Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to control that AFC for quite some time, because after Brady and Belichick, we've talked about it. Who are they really going to go through? Some of the teams are doing okay, but even when the Colts came into town, they took care of business there. The Steelers, they're kind of a mess. There's up-and-coming teams. I think the Browns are going to keep getting a lot better. But to me, the NFC is where teams are going to grow into something here, like the Bears, Dallas, Eagles. I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to get better. San Francisco. What are the Vikings going to do? What adjustments are they going to make? How upset is Aaron Rodgers going to be that he's kind of flunking out of school right now? Then you've got to figure the Falcons into this, especially division rivals with the Saints. I just think the Saints have more to go through right now than Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I like the Chiefs all the way on this question.
I tend to agree with you, because when you look at the sort of the gauntlet of the NFC, seems like all the good quarterbacks are sort of migrating there. All the good young quarterbacks, I should say, because really it feels like, okay, you get past Mahomes and Brady, who's sort of the next guy? You know, Luck's not really that young of a guy. They're going to still have to make some upgrades to that roster. And then you have Deshaun Watson and you have Baker Mayfield. And then you really don't have a lot. Rivers is getting older. Feels like all the young talent is in the NFC. Now, if you're a Chiefs fan, you had the Patriots, you had them at home. This was supposed to be the time that Brady, at his age, you couldn't get past him. Now the Patriots have 12 picks coming up in this draft. It's almost like the Patriots offer such a gauntlet. I'm not sure that the Chiefs can get past them even next year, but I still think their road is probably easier than the Saints. So I tend to kind of begrudgingly agree with you, just because any little thing that happens to the Saints, they could be on the road for multiple playoff games. And based on what I saw this year, I don't know if they have enough in the tank, unless they make some major offseason adjustments, to be able to get through what's going to be a really good NFC for quite a while with all the young, talented quarterbacks. So, Eric, one last topic here on the show, and fittingly, we're talking about young, talented quarterbacks in the league, and that takes us to Carson Wentz. And we've talked quite a bit about Carson Wentz on this show. What should the Eagles do with him? Should they keep Foles, try to trade Wentz? You were against that. You want to see this Eagles team going forward with Wentz, and the Eagles agreed with you, as they announced last week. We talked about it briefly on the show, that Carson Wentz is their guy going forward. But more of a local beat in Philly, the PhillyVoice.com had a story that came out that pretty much ripped Carson Wentz in every way possible. Literally everything from his on-field performance to his presence in the locker room to the fact that he comes across as a selfish guy that can't take criticism. So, Eric, there seems to be points in this story that you could sort of say, okay, 1 + 1 = 2 based on what we saw on the field from this team. So do you feel like there's any truth to this article, or is this a piece to get some hits on a website, or is this a few guys that have some grudges that they're grinding out now that Foles looks to be gone and it'll be Carson Wentz team going forward?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. Obviously, being from up near this market, you hear more of this and you kind of follow it. Especially as an Eagles fan, I follow it. But I was shocked that they're using words like selfish and uncompromising and egotistical and things like that, because it seemed to me that a couple years ago, when they were running through the NFC and Carson Wentz, right before he goes down with that ACL injury, you see the way that the team is on the sideline. You see just how exuberant and excited and how much emotion that team had. And they just seemed to really enjoy winning football games together.